okay with you? Okay. And I'm just going to get rid of this annoying floating bar as well at the bottom. Fabulous. I can see my own screen now. You may hear a cat cry as we start. Don't worry, they're not being tortured in any way. It's my pet cat Mowgli. For some reason, he's decided to chirp up the sound, so apologies about that. Okay, so this is a really, really good time now to get you to start to think about the relationship between your course and careers and career outcomes. So we are going to talk a little bit about what you can do afterwards, but actually I kind of want to talk a little bit about how your course actually applies to work, and the things that you learn and the things that you do are all an integral part of that. Okay, so there's lots to cover. If we miss any, I apologize, and the slides will be available. You can also have a chat with me, but let's get started. So there's three key areas today that I'd like us to go over. The career development process. So I kind of want to talk to you a little bit about where careers fits and what I think you should be doing over that 2.5, 3 year sort of student life cycle. Secondly, thinking about what is early childhood. Now that might seem like a really silly question, but I can guarantee most of you will be stumped if you actually think about what it is. So I want us to kind of reinvigorate ourselves with what we're actually trying to do, which is bigger than assignments, seminars, lectures. It's bigger than that. Why are we here? Okay. And then the last bit is to talk about where your studies and what I call career functions meet. So here I'm going to talk a little bit about what kind of careers you could do in professions, some in detail, and then some others just to sort of whet your appetite and get you thinking about where this all goes. Okay, so let's start with the first area. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if it's all right, is Sarah mentioned maybe doing some reflection. We're going to have some questions now, and I'd be really grateful if anyone wanted to type in the chat what their thoughts are. But if you could sort of jot these questions along as you go and some responses, that would be outstanding. So, career in you. The first question I want to ask you, if you can put this in the chat, is what you think career is and its relationship to you. So if I pick up the first two willing participants that are willing to type in the chat, what do you think career is and how does that relate to you? So we've had one, which is your future plans. Something you enjoy that brings you success. That's brilliant. Thank you. And what do you think, just really quickly, what do you think this relates to? So we've got future plans, we've got success, and then Bonnie has just said something you enjoy, how you make a living. So do you think what we're talking about here is jobs? Is that fair? Aspirations, great, thank you. Thanks for the contributions, and just jot these down as a note as we go. So the geeky part in me would always start with what the Oxford Dictionary's got to say. So the Oxford Dictionary says an occupation undertaken for a significant period of a person's life with opportunity for progress. So the words that really jump out at me here are occupation and progress. So we're talking about something that is maybe more than just a hobby. I think that's the most important thing. But what I would suggest to you is, this is really limited. So you're probably wondering why I'm asking you this question. So my take on this is career is much more than employment. So let's just take a second and just take stock. What's led you to this course is going to be more than employment, because you probably never really had the opportunity to work with children in a professional capacity. So it's more than that. That could be having siblings, families, babysitting, looking after someone. Or if you think about a midwife, for example, a lot of midwives' first experiences come from being birthing partners before they even start training. So we always have to be conscious of that career is a wider part of our life. So these are some of the things I think. It's leisure time. It includes your studies. It certainly includes your personal interests. So if that's working with children, maybe children of a particular type of group or need or subject, these are things that are probably going to come from outside of work. Experiences, family and friends, employment, which I want to add is just one tiny strand of what I think career is. Your culture, training and development that you might do, your childhood. So in my opinion, everything you do is part of your career. Whether you ever have paid employment again, you still have interests, you still can relate to these areas. So is it okay if I just ask for a little bit of feedback in terms of what brought you to this course, or what your interest in children is? Where did it come from? So again, if you could use the chat feature, that would be brilliant. Okay, so we've got a couple coming through now. Sports coaching experience, teaching and volunteering. That's a lovely one there. Watching my niece and nephew grow up sparked my interest. Terry says she likes the thought of shaping someone's life. And then we've got work experience in a primary school. So I really appreciate all these coming in. And again, when things get tough or when we're unsure about what we want to do, which a lot of people think that's what you do with careers advisors, they tell you what you can do with your life. We've got to hold on to these things. So one of the main reasons I'm a careers advisor is because it took me 18 months to find my first job after I graduated. And that time really affected my outlook on things. So part of my drive is to make sure no one ever feels the way I do. So we need to hold on to these things. They're absolutely relevant and they're definitely part of your career. So at some point when you look at maybe postgraduate training or a master's or a profession, they will ask you, what is it about this area that interests you? And what you put there is the most relevant thing because it's real. That's what somebody wants to hear. Okay, so thanks for your input on that. So career and you. So there's two questions that I want you to jot down. If you want to share it, you can do. But we've kind of covered the subject area. So answer one of these two questions. And if you want to contribute, you can. Why did you decide to come to university, particularly now? And the second one there, number 2, says graduate you. What I want you to think about is when you were deciding to apply on UCAS, what did you think the graduate you would look like compared to the non-graduate you? So it can be something silly and whimsical, or it can be something that's really precise and specific. So for me, when I decided to do law as my undergrad, I just wanted to be the cleverest person in the room. So if I was out at the pub with my friends and somebody said something, I'd say, no, you're wrong about that. because section blah blah subsection part A point 2 says this, and everyone would be like, whoa, you really are dead smart, aren't you? So I just wanted to be probably a lawyer. I'm really clever, which might sound daft. So I want you to just answer one of those two questions. Why did you come to university? And what do you think, and this is the interesting, what do you think the graduate you would look like compared to the non-graduate you? So apologies if I've got this wrong. Pronouncing your name as Effie. So Effie says, to make a better life for myself and have a big back garden with my dogs. Graduate me would be more successful and happier with herself, with more opportunities and a more fulfilling career. So you're really thinking about that sort of work-life balance there, aren't you, Effie? About what it can give you in your sort of wider career and also the types of jobs. Hannah says to pursue her dream career and experience life outside of a small town. Rebecca says a holistic understanding of how to care for children. Thank you very much. So again, you know, in terms of reflection, it's so easy to get buried and bogged down in this sort of rigmarole of seminars, lectures and assignments, Christmas, Easter and summer breaks. But actually, we can never forget what we're trying to do, because that's the purpose in being here. Okay? So I just want to talk to you a little bit now about the career development process. So this is something I work alongside your academic to sort of plan and put together, and also how I would do. So a lot of professionals to do next. There, we have on the left your degree studies, and on the right your career development timeline. So year one, alongside your academics, unless you know exactly what you want to do, I want you to explore an experiment. An exploration is going to be part of this session, but also I just want you to use some of the resources to think about what's relevant to your subject. Don't have to want to do it. In fact, ignore deciding whether you like it or not, because it's too early. So where I think most graduates fail with employability is they don't know everything there is, because they thought, I'll do this or I'll do that. And it ends up being like a giant game of whack-a-mole. Okay? Experimentation's a little bit harder at the minute because of COVID, and it's a real challenge. But by that, I mean when things improve, try and get work shadowing, try and talk to professionals. So that's something you could do on LinkedIn now, to just get a feel for what it looks like. So the literature can only tell you so much. Year two, we really need to start thinking at this point. If we know what options there are, we really need to test them and try them out. So the next step should really be some type of work experience or shadowing. And then starting to think, how does this match my personality? So for the extroverts in the room who love working with big groups and get energized by that, teaching big groups could be one way to go. If you feel a little bit more introverted and prefer to work with individuals or smaller groups, that could be something more therapeutic. So listen to what your gut tells you. Try not to fight it in terms of what do I want from work and what are my styles, and then match it against what we know. Okay? So hopefully this is all straightforward. And then final year, to start thinking about making a decision. So I think it's a fool's errand to think that somebody can make a career decision, one, and stick with it. If you can, you know, I envy you. But hopefully we've narrowed it down to about 2 or 3 different choices. And ideally, they're roughly in the same type of area. So if you're interested in welfare and well-being, it could be family support worker, counsellor, social worker. So we can start narrowing down those options, and there could be progression from one. So I want you to start to decide a master's, graduate scheme, or a job. And then obviously graduation and next steps. So it might be you want to recycle this and do it over again after you graduate. There's nothing wrong with that cycle approach. But for these 3 academic years, this is how I would encourage you to think. You. And that's the most important thing. And it's important to instill this very early on. You will only get so much from your academics, from your course, from me. And the students who tend to go on and do the best are the ones who use their initiative and try and differentiate themselves from their peers. And it could just be a little thing. So I've mentioned before about perhaps having LinkedIn meetings with professionals. You could easily put that on your CV or in a personal statement. Just name it, date it, and highlight what you spoke about. And that could also come back to help you in securing a job later on as well. So those little things. But the thing I want to point out is everyone's here to help you. We're here to enable you, facilitate you, and support you every step of the way, whether that's just an appointment with me or a 5-minute chat or to talk to one of your academics about how things really look. So we've covered the first area. So now let's look at more closely at what your studies are. So again, if you can put this in the chat, and I make note of them for later as well, because they're really reflective areas. What is childhood education? Do you think it's important? What are the positive impacts of doing it? And let me just drag this out. Who these positive impacts? So if you could put in the chat either 1 for question 1, 2 for question 2, 3, and put in the chat what you think in your own words, because they tend to be the most interesting. A minute to do that and have a quick sip of my coffee. So what do you think? Any takers? Okay, so our first one through. This is from Bonnie. So the beginning learning chapters of a child's life. So number 2, why is it important? It's important because it helps a child learn about who they are as an individual. Number 3, the positive impact, so healthy relationships, sustainable future. And number 4, both the children and the educator. Absolutely. And let's just see if anybody else is typing. But I would also say, that bottom one, society is all a big beneficiary of this. So there's lots and lots of research to talk about the benefits of early childhood intervention. Okay, so we've got Taylor, the child's development and how they progress through education. It's important because their primary socialization helps them move onto adult socialization. So we're talking about transition there, and in a positive way. If so positive childhood will have more positive impact on their life, education, jobs, social life, motor skills, everything. And child and parents and teachers receive positive impacts. Thank you very much, Taylor. So there's a lot of research that says around 20% gain in IQ. IQ is a difficult thing to measure and define, but in terms of IQ tests from research in America, up to 20%. People that receive early childhood education tend to make a smoother transition throughout the stages and into employment. They tend to have a longer lifespan, and they tend to have even healthier lifestyles, including diet. Kickstarting very early has got a lot of good proven impacts. I'm sure you're all. Again, why these are important. If you want to do research, or you want to do a master's, or you want to work in one of these areas, you ask question number 1. You'll have to show number 2 and be aware of 3 and 4 for sure. So please make notes of those. So what interests you about early childhood study? Just to provoke you and get you thinking rather than answering. So is it a particular model of practice, such as Piaget? Is it a framework or a policy like the EYFS? Is it a theory or a theorist? Something in. Oh, sorry. Is it something else? I'm sure I've got the order wrong somewhere. Is it just working with children? So sorry, that's something else. The penultimate one is really something for you to take away. But as a group, I think, you really contributed heavy to that. I can see a lot of positive engagement in terms of why this area interests you. But again, hold on to that. Okay, so just before I move forward in terms of the types of occupations you can do and functions, does anybody have any questions around what we've covered? So the concept of career, how it relates to you, and also interests you. Does anything come up that you'd like to ask before I move on? Okay, well, I'll carry on. I can see at the bottom of my information bar there. So if any questions come up, I'm happy to stop and answer those. And also, if you have any questions about the career sections as we go forward, feel free to stop me, because it's your time. It's all about you and making the most of this session. So yeah, feel free at any time to stop me. Okay, so your studies and career functions. In a second. So the first thing is thinking about the link. So a lot of students and a lot of people generally think it goes in this order. So school, possibly college, do a degree, then decide what you want to do and get a job. And I think, that's a route that works, but it doesn't work very well. So if you've got an interest in your area that you want to take forward, we need to constantly get in the habit of thinking that what we're learning applies in real life. A lot of it's being used now, and there's no reason why you can't go ahead and test and try some of the things you've learned. It's a really effective way to improve your grades, and also just starts beating that path towards the career that you might need help deciding with, or that you really want. So this fusion of what we're learning and how it's used in real life. Okay. So this is a picture, a grainy picture of Jean Piaget, a theorist I hope you've already heard of, but you most certainly will cover a lot of in early childhood education. And these are, with him, are two of his children. Now, what I really like about Piaget from my own study and my own interests is he developed a large part, the bedrock of his theory and his understanding was based on him testing his own children. Now that kind of seems absurd, doesn't it? When we think of theorists, we expect them to either be working really hard in a lab or buried in books, huge sample sizes, or watching what other people do. This is basically a man who learned from his own children developing and was able to theorize from it. And that tells me, you know, anyone can do it. So we might not be as good, we might be better, it might be different. Don't worry about that. So here's just a little bit of a breakdown of who this guy is. So I'm just going to go back, sorry. So he was born in Switzerland. His research was actually on natural sciences, which has very little to do, if not anything to do with early childhood. As his career and his research developed, he became interested in wrong answers. He continued his own studies, as I said, by watching and observing his children. So this guy whose expertise aren't even in early childhood to start with. And again, my point is here, things that he's read, things that he's seen, he started thinking, interesting, how does this work in real life? For you to grades and to be engaged the most and to have a successful transition into career, it's a really good, healthy way to think, how does this fit with what's applying in real life? Try not to be a passive recipient of what you're learning, because it all connects. So I mentioned earlier functions. So to me, functions are everything involved in a job or a profession. So I don't want to overcomplicate your thinking with talking about, tell me skills that you've got, tell me knowledge, tell me experience, tell me attributes, tell me what this professional does. Let's just put it all into one area. So it's everything that's involved. And this is the thing I want you to be most interested in. And hopefully Sarah and Jane can ask you some questions. So I want what are the functions of a job, or what are the skills? Always think about what do they do and what do they need to be able to do it, okay? So my definition of this is it can involve skills, the duties that a professional does, knowledge and expertise to be able to do it, experience and attribute. Why bother over complicating this with ourselves when we could just say functions? So I really want you to bear that in mind, okay? So now we're going to look at 5 different professions in more depth. These are things that I believe are directly relevant to your course. They may require additional training, but are certainly natural outcomes of the course. We're going to look at the functions and descriptions, and then a little bit about what you need to take the next step. Okay, after that, I'll just give you a short review of other things that I think are relevant to your course. And then after that, we'll summarize, and any questions you have, just put them out there. So the floor's yours. So if you see anything during each profession as well, feel free to ask. So an early years, or sometimes known as reception teacher. So the role of an early years teacher is to basically motivate and inspire and harness the early learning of a child. I think a big part of this, as I'm sure you're aware, study is imaginative play. So have a think about how that can relate. And it also contributes to developing communicative and intellectual skills. So I've got a little girl. I'll be able to hear her shouting from where my wife is keeping an eye on her. She's 4 and we're currently working on phonics. So going back to Piaget, what I personally find is if we can make a game out of phonics and letters, she tends to just relate to it a little bit better and try a little bit harder than looking straight at a tablet and trying to read words. So I can see this actually happening in action. So when I'm telling you to think about how it relates, I guess this is how I can sort of understand where you are. Right, so the function, so the most important part A strong commitment to work with children. So a lot of you said that very early on in this session about, why you're on this course. Knowledge of EYFS, which Sarah's assured me you've already touched upon. Lesson planning is probably the biggest difference between, say, a key person in a nursery and a teacher in reception. Lots and lots of lesson planning and thinking of different approaches to get students to learn. Okay, delivery of those skills, and it's my personal opinion, I define good delivery as translating something that's complicated into something that's simple. And I think this is, the cornerstone of a reception teacher's work. Monitoring and assessments, so making sure progress is being made. Strong knowledge of safeguarding, for sure. I think a patient kind of mindset, because things will take time. And energetic. So again, thinking about what drives you for your interest in this subject could relate to some of those things. In terms of what you'd need to be able to do it, so early years teacher status, known as EYTS, and that will require you to do an initial teacher training program as a postgraduate year. So, for most people, straight after they graduate from their degree. So again, if you've got any questions, just throw them in. Okay, so that was the early years teacher. A second area that's different to that is family support worker. So very similar to a social worker, but I think this is more of an entry role, good early step to go into social work as well, which is why I've chosen that one. So a really good all-rounder here who can work with children, young people and families with lots of different issues and challenges. So that could be learning difficulties, it could be poverty, homelessness, domestic abuse, it could even be cultural issues as well. And the thought here really is to self-empower, so to help, but to self-empower service users and families to help themselves. That's the bigger picture. So if you're a strategist and you love long-term planning and you get a buzz out of seeing people be able to look after themselves, this could be an area for you. So in terms of functions, primarily a strong commitment to families and children, carrying out assessments. So these could be to make sure environments are safe or to look at risks. I've just mentioned they're monitoring risk as well. So that's a big area of this, to think about what risk is and how it works. Okay, to be empathetic. And for anyone who's unsure of what that means, the big difference between sympathy and empathy is that somebody who's empathetic can understand and listen to things from the other person's point of view. That might not mean that they agree with them, but they can. Sympathy, on the other hand, is more being in agreement with somebody's point of view and trying to help them through it as if it was their problem. So empathy is more being objective. It's more understanding why the client is perhaps troubled and to work out clear steps. So a really strong trait to have. Strong people skills, and these two go together really well. So being able to influence people, being a good role model, for example, like the research of Bandura. So showing people that there are alternatives and that you can lead them there. Multi-agency practice, and what that means is working with different types of support groups and professionals. So it could be a teacher, it could be a SENCO, be a social worker, could even be the police, probation. So to know where your limits are and to involve somebody else. Knowledge of relevant legislation and policy is an absolute must based on those assessments. Okay, so in terms of the family support worker, have a relevant qualification. So I think early childhood is a really good, strong, relevant one. a degree and a master's are advantageous. And that might be your entry level's a bit higher, or you're able to accelerate your career quickly. And social work as well. This is quite a good stepping stone job for that. And in terms of when we were thinking about the career progression model earlier on, while you're here, to try and get some sort of exposure or experience to safeguarding practices and families, that's a must to make that next step. Okay. Play therapy. So working with children, typically age 3 to 11, a little bit like the reception teacher, but in a different way. So using play almost as a develop trust relationships and to get the child to be able to understand and talk about particular issues and problems. So play is almost the vehicle, the way that they do that. And as I'm sure you're aware from your studies already, play is such an effective approach to young children, for definite. Okay. So in terms of functions, and emotional predicaments. So up, you'll notice from the functions so far that I've said a commitment to work with children or a desire or something else, but I've kind of qualified it with something a bit more. So when people come to see me for appointments, they'll say, I want a career where I can help people. And I'll say, how do you want to help people? And they'll look and they'll go, I don't know. Most people are driven to help others, but particularly in a discipline like yours. So we need to take that next step. So you'll notice here, it's not just a desire to help. It's not just a desire to help children. It's a desire to help them emotionally and maybe from a mental health aspect as well. So that's the focus. Carrying out assessments. So some of these will be about risk, but really to identify what the problems are and monitor progress. Accept referrals and make to other professionals. So you may receive them referrals from schools, from social workers. You may want to make referrals to educational psychologists and counsellors too. And again, that empathy approach is, an integral part. A thorough understanding of play and related practices. I think that's where your course comes in really strongly. To be influential, again, looking at working with different specialists and expertise, and also to provide therapeutic intervention. So that means physically administering help. And that's a little bit different from the other areas we've looked at so far. So the requirements here are to have a relevant postgrad qualification. You've got 2 routes, so both of these are masters, one through the British Association of Play Therapists, which I think tends to be the most common, or Play Therapy UK. And that will then enable you to register as a play therapist. Okay, special educational needs, or SEN. So working with learners who require extra support or advanced programs of learning. And this can involve working with a range of different physical impairments, disabilities, or other difficulties alongside that. So again, a really good all-rounder. In terms of functions, a desire to help children with barriers to learning, the ability to prepare bespoke lessons for the needs of those children, specialist skills such as sign or braille, I think would be useful, collaborate with teachers, a thorough understanding of disabilities, difficulties and impairments. So that goes back to that empathy stuff again. So if we know where our learner or our client's coming from, we'll be able to help them better. Okay. Multi-agency practicing, maintaining effective progress for records. So to do this, you'll need to do an initial. So again, that will be a postgrad. It's called QTS, so Qualified Teacher Status. Okay, a children's nurse, so the last one. This could also be known as a pediatric nurse and involves a key role in basically the assessment and medical care of a child. Functions here, a desire to support children with health needs, medical knowledge that you'll gain during your training, assess, observe and report conditions, respond to emergencies, support, advice and education to children and parents, the best way to go forward, particularly if it's something around an impairment or a disability, assist with testing and procedures, administer drugs and injections. The thought of taking blood from someone for me makes me feel woozy, even thinking about it. So you'd hate to see me having a blood test. It's not pleasant. So to do this, you need to be registered with Nursing and Midwifery Council. So you would need to do a pre-registration nursing program, which is a master's, and they take 2 years. So anybody who's thinking about that career change into nursing, it's a beaten path, and it's something that I know a lot of people may be to answer any questions on that. So sorry, Sarah, I'm just going to rush through the last be available for you to see. So other things that are relevant are educational consultant, health play specialist, learning mentor, primary school teacher, SENCO, social worker, teaching assistant, youth worker, educational psychologist, child psychotherapist, community development worker, speech and language therapist. And there are many, many more, but these are the ones I would say all fit into that sort of relevant, like a who to your course. So going back to functions, and again, Sarah, if you could pick up on this, that'd be great, or Jane. Common themes that have come out of those functions. So working with risk. All those clients pose a risk to get the right solution, or perhaps a risk to themselves. So how does that look? Relevant legislation and policy. Assessment, signposting and recommendations. So that could involve strong numeracy skills, could involve having really good attention to detail to see where issues lie, or to just give good feedback on progress. Personal empowerment. So most of these professions are around helping people help themselves. Okay. And then obviously working with children. So they're the main client base for professions in this area. So these things all come up a lot. And my point is here, if you're looking to get experience and develop your expertise, this would be a really good way to go. Oh, and obviously private, public and third sector. So just rush this last bit. Career comes in a multitude of forms. So as we've said, it's more than a job. And if it was about a job, no one would be on this course. I could say that confidently, okay? Please refer back to the career development process in terms of thinking about how you're going to plan a way forward, okay? Think about how you're defining early education studies, early childhood education studies, and then just think about, to build up your experience and your skills, what career functions you actually need. Okay, so that concludes the session. You'll see there my name again, my email, so saundem@hope.ac.uk if you want to book an appointment or have any questions. The more general email is careers@hope.ac.uk. I really hope you found that useful, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. That's great. Very good, very helpful. So just in the last couple of moments, has anybody got any more questions or comments or queries you want to type in the chat, or to unmute yourselves and to ask as well?